Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin. Today, my dear friends, subscribers, and listeners, I'd like to focus on President Zelensky. And the title of my presentation today is How Long Can Zelensky Survive? Now, obviously, you're watching the news and you realize that there is a big problem caused by the financial scandal, a corruption scandal that has been going on for some time in Ukraine. But over the last weekend, a dramatic development is the resignation of the office of the President Zelensky, the director of the office of the President, Mr. Yermack. Now, Mr. Yermack is not just the office of the President manager. He, in fact, was not only the right-hand man of Mr. Zelensky, he was actually a de facto co-president, if not more so, because all the appointments of major functions of the government and which was much more significant of the money flows were going through Yermack. He was a very close associate and a friend, and it's absolutely inconceivable that the corruption scandal was unknown and the schemes were unknown to Mr. Zelensky. Now, let me focus a little bit about what is going on. There are a lot of information. There's a lot of information and so much of it that one could just lose a track of things when one begins to unravel this. But let me try to do a very quick summary about the extent to which Yermack was involved and by implication the extent to which Mr. Zelensky was involved in this as well. Now, as you all know, the Yermack scandal is connected to the scandal that first was about Mr. Mindich, who was known as the pocket of the president. Now, Mindich ran away to Israel with no extradition, but this is all called the Midas affair, and that is the unraveling of the financial schemes and manipulations. And what the West is talking about, Western media, is a 100 million energo-atom company scandal, and that is and then some media picked up on the golden toilets and that kind of stuff. No, it's much more complicated. NABU, which is a national anti-corruption agency, has thousands, as they say, of pages of data which they had been recording conversations and things like that from many years ago. So they've been collecting information on a lot of corruption cases. They were supported by Western donors, USAID before and now by the Europeans. And of course, there is an FBI connection in a sense that what NABU knows, FBI knows too. Now, in July, Zelensky tried to get rid of them and passed a law that he would be the one in charge of NABU and tried to remove the heads of the NABU by accusing them of being Russian agents. Now, that didn't work because Poroshenko and a former president and his supporters started street demonstrations, and there was an outcry in Europe, and he reversed his decision and NABU remained independent. And then, bang, there was this Mindich scandal that exposed corrupt schemes. But what I'm trying to say that the energo-atom energy company scandal, siphoning off and paybacks, is no more than a tip of an iceberg. There is much more. And the nickname that they used for Yermack is Alibaba. And then there were jokes in the media of Alibaba and 40 thieves, and there's probably more than 40. The reason he was called an Alibaba is that his acronym, I mean, his first name is Andrei and his patronymic Borisovich, which is AB, and that is why he was called Alibaba. And that means that he had control over appointments in the administration, and that is why he was actually running the entire scheme of all these cutbacks. Now, what particularly is scared now is that from the Energoatom, Nabu moved to procurement scandal. Procurement, only one page of it is, now became public about the Chinese jackets for soldiers that were of low quality, and they were listed as good quality, and then they siphoned off the difference between the two. But that also is just the tip of an iceberg. There's much more that was connected with procurement and special companies that were created to siphon the money and to put it in offshore accounts. And the thing, of course, is that this is huge amounts of money, so much money that the Ukraine had never had, nowhere close to it. The entire economy of Ukraine could fit into these $350 billion they received from Western sponsors. So the billions that were flowing through these channels, never verified, never had any accounting or audit. So this gives you an idea how serious this is. And now, of course, this is all in the hands of Nabu and by implication the FBI. So Yermack chose to resign, and some of the sources say that there was a shouting match between him and Zelensky, that he felt that he was betrayed, and then he went to the army. That sounds very patriotic, but there is a law in Ukraine that says that if there are criminal charges against someone who joined the army, then these criminal charges are not dropped but frozen for further notice until the end of the war. So this is a pretty good defense for him when he goes to the army. Now, politically, this is extremely important. Why Yermack resignation is so important? Because you shouldn't think of it as a kind of a, office by regulatory mechanisms, balance of power, various institutions. No, Yermack controlled everything. And that means that there were these overseers of the regional authorities that actually controlled the election process, and then in a way they were the generators of the majority in the parliament, in the Rada. And now that they will be replaced by somebody new, that means that Zelensky will not have control over the provinces, and that means over the majority in the parliament, and that means that he could be removed by the parliament because his term is expired, and the only reason he is called president is because this is an emergency rule, and as soon as or if the Rada has a new majority, the Rada by constitution can pass power to the Speaker of the House of the Rada, and then president could stop being president because they would have to have new elections, and in the new elections Zelensky stands no chance. Therefore, he needs to continue the war. He needs to continue the emergency declaration of emergency rule, and he has to control over the state apparatus, which he is beginning to lose. Now, there's talk in Ukraine, in Kiev, about creating the national unity government, and that is specifically something that was done before in previous occasions, but now it seems to me there's a kind of a truce between various kinds of opponents of Zelensky, and that is Poroshenko, former president, and Timoshenko, former prime minister, and Mr. Arakhania, who is crucial because he is now the chief of the faction in the Duma of the ruling party, which is called Servants of the People, and he was actually pushing for a resignation of Yermack. In other words, these people are all united to curb the power of Zelensky, or to remove him and put somebody else. Now, obviously, the national unity government, they think, would have more legitimacy in signing any peace accords that is demanded of them. Now, in other words, to finish with Zelensky, and then I go on to the political fallout for the Americans and for the Russians and for the Europeans. Yermack's resignation is the beginning of the end of Mr. Zelensky. He will not be able, in my judgment, to hold on to power much longer. He might for a while, but given the pressure by the Americans on him on the one side and the Russian offensive on the ground on the other side, he doesn't have much choices. Now, of course, Zelensky is counting on European help, and the Europeans are trying very hard to sabotage the Trump Putin accord or possible understanding in the peace process. However, Europeans have not much. The only thing that they count on is to confiscate Russian assets, the 300 billion. And they may do it. However, this is going to be very difficult because so far Belgian Prime Minister has been objecting on the grounds that this is unprecedented and that would, if there is no capitulation of Moscow to pay reparations, they will have to pay it back. Now, also, Russia said that if that happens, then they would also confiscate whatever assets of the participating countries in Russia they may have, and they still have some, and they've respected private property rights up to now. Now, it would also sabotage any peace agreement with Trump, because what's the use of any agreement if they seize this money? So this is what the Europeans are hoping to break this possible accord by confiscating of the money and giving it to Zelensky. However, even if they confiscate the money, it would be very difficult for them to justify giving the money to the government, which is so corrupt. In other words, the corruption scandal is very much working against European support, because even though von der Leyen, prefers to ignore the corruption scandal and they were ready to support Ukrainian democracy further, it ain't a democracy anymore, and everybody knows it. And Hungary and Orban is doing everything to incline other Europeans to refuse to pay anything into the support of Ukraine. So Europe is divided, and very seriously divided in this support of the warmongers to continue the war. Now, what are they counting on? What they're counting on, when I read their newspapers and their arguments, it's kind of pathetic. You read the newspapers where they say Putin is going to run out of money to pay his soldiers. On what grounds? How do they think so? Or why? Why should he run out? Hasn't run out in 4 years. The economy is doing 4% growth. On what basis? None whatsoever. So they're kind of hoping for something happen. Maybe Putin would, get sick, or somebody would produce some kind of miracle, and that's what they can hope for in order to support Mr. Zelensky in power. Macron is doing everything in his power to support Zelensky, to convince Trump to change his mind, and so on and so forth. And then all that, I think, is pathetic and ridiculous, and it will not work. Now, in terms of Americans, what is so interesting is that they are very much among those who probably supported Yermack's resignation, and probably there is some speculation by some analysts that the Americans, despite Rubio's efforts to support Zelensky and to support Ukrainian claims in the peace negotiations, Trump is, it seems to me, very much against Zelensky, and is among those who would probably think that chances for his peace proposals to succeed would be better if Zelensky was out. Now, what makes this really possible is that my understanding is that Poroshenko and Timoshenko and Arahamiya, and among other Ukrainian leaders, are now beginning to think that in view of the Russian offensive, it would be better off to hold on to what they have rather than to fight for impossible to achieve, such as borders of 1991. So it seems to me that the Americans found people in Ukraine who are willing to acknowledge the reality and to recognize the necessity of proceeding along the lines of President Trump's peace proposals. Now, let me just switch and discuss what the Russians are likely to do. Now, let me explain to you that Putin has a hard time selling the 28-point plan, even without the omissions made by Rubio in favor of Ukraine and Zelensky. Even that plan, even if it says what the Russians want, no NATO expansion, no foreign troops, and a revision of territory in favor of Donbass in Russia. Even if these are accepted, he would have a hard time selling it to the Russian public. Why? Well, because there are no guarantees that 3 or 4 years from now a new Ukrainian government would denounce it and change its constitution one more time, saying that they want to be a member of NATO. Now, even if there's an international treaty that guarantees this, which is better, still there is no guarantee that this would be for serious and for a long time. In other words, I think the Russians are going to be harder this time, and they're beginning to think so and to say so, in that there is a need to be denazification, or to put it in Western terminology, regime change. I don't think they would want to work with Zelensky, or even if it's not Zelensky, but the Maidan-generated Bandera sympathetic government, such would be the one of Poroshenko or Klitschko or Zaluzhny. I think they would want to have a clean start with truly free elections for all political parties, including those that are pro-Russian. And this would be very difficult to organize, but truly free elections, and then an international treaty. And that is very difficult to set, because the Europeans are in no mood to conclude any kind of treaty with the Russians. So that's why the current, the coming visit of Witkoff to Moscow, I don't think is going to yield that much. At best, it could generate a roadmap that Russians would propose to not only agree to some territorial exchange, but most importantly for the international treaty with the participation of Europeans, because without them, no treaty with Ukraine would make any sense. So, that's the update for you, my dear friends, and we shall see how these dramatic events are going to unfold. And my understanding is that Zelensky's days are numbered and that the Russian army will continue its advance. Thank you very much, and don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to put your likes, and don't forget I have several other playlists on Russian history, on Soviet history, on post-Soviet history, and so on. Bye-bye.